Hello and welcome to Also Interesting. This episode will entirely be in English. Joining me today and following my invitation is Mark Lewis. He is a YouTuber, podcaster. He is a motivator and an inspiration for many. And so he was an inspiration for me, starting running again. He's not just an athlete, he's an above average athlete. And why that matters, we will discuss later on. Thanks for being here, Mark.
Well, thanks for having me.
So if I missed some of your professions, please fill them in.
No, it sounded, in fact, you probably added in more than I would myself, so I'm happy with that.
You caught my interest when I started in the pandemic, looking out for things to do and not dying from bed rot. So I thought getting my VO2 max on a higher level than the very low level it has been back then would be preferable. And I did 10 years of judo, but in the pandemic, contact sports wasn't an option at all. So I thought about what would be the least annoying thing to get back in shape. And I was looking for how to start with running and how to start with park runs. And then I stumbled upon your videos and your journey from being very out of shape, going back, not just being in shape again, but being above average fit. And I would like to talk with you about that journey. And so for our audience, would you please tell them how you got out of shape and how you got back into it?
Yeah, sure. So I got out of shape quite early on. I was in reasonable shape when I was a teenager. I worked as a lifeguard, and I worked in the leisure centre that I worked at had a gym, so I worked in the gym a bit, and that would have been. I was born 1973, so that would have been sort of late 80s, very early 90s. I did that. And then at the age of 21, I had my first child, my daughter, and I realized that I couldn't raise her on a lifeguard income because it wasn't paying very much. And so I quit and just went and did the first thing that I found in a local newspaper, because back then that's how you got a job. You read through the newspaper, and that was for selling financial services, life insurance and stuff. So back in the 90s, that was an industry that you could just walk straight into with zero qualifications, as long as you demonstrated an ability to sell stuff, which is probably why the industry, certainly in this country, well, actually across the board, really across the world, it gets such a rough reputation from back then. So I walked straight into that and made the sort of money that I wanted to make in order to feed myself and my child and my partner, who then became my wife. And while that was going on, I just ate burgers. So that was the kind of start of the downfall, really. I made some money. I mean, yeah, anybody that's got any understanding of financial services in the 90s will know that that's a pretty straightforward thing to do back then. So money was good, but it meant long hours, reasonably high stress, and that just led to kind of comfort eating or convenience eating. I mean, basically, it was all the bad types of eating. It was comfort, it was convenience, it was stress. I mean, all the reasons why you shouldn't eat, I ate non-stop. So from about the age of 22, I was in pretty rubbish shape, and that then just stayed for years and years and years. So I got to about 35 years of age, maybe 36, and I thought, this is just ridiculous. I'm now 350 pounds in weight, and just, I don't know what that is in kilos, lots. I was just obese. And I kind of got away with it because I'm 6'6". So let's put that into European. What's that, like 198 centimeters?
Probably, let me just check. 6.
About
that's inches. I'll just.
I reckon it's about
it's roughly about 2 meters, 6.6.
Yeah, it's just under 2 meters, because most doorways in the UK are 2 meters, and I just scrape under a door. So because I'm tall, I was able to be stupidly heavy and it not look too bad. I mean, I say it doesn't look too bad. I look back at photographs of me now, and I was clearly a fat man in a suit. But I sort of got away with it. I didn't. If I'd been 5'6", I would have looked absolutely ridiculous. But I managed to be.
Yeah, sure. It's not. Yeah, it's this common thing of just being a big guy and not chunky because you're so tall.
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of 150 kilos. That to put it into European money. So about 150, and I mean, men get a slightly easier deal on that because there's a kind of, you're just a big guy. There's this sort of attitude that you're just especially in the UK, and actually even more so in America. If you're just, I mean, really fat, but just big with it, you can kind of pull it off as just being a big bloke. And actually what that means is you're for many people, it's just fat. So I got away with it, but I say I got away with it. I mean, I got away with it wearing a suit during the day. You know, people would say to me, "Hey, it didn't look that bad." But yeah, every morning I'm waking up looking in the mirror with no suit on, and I'm going to bed at night with no suit on. So I'm well aware that I'm not where I want to be. So I decided to get in shape. And when I say I decided to get in shape, it's tricky when I say that because I know lots of people want to know what it was that kind of sparked that change of direction. Because if I could tell them, then it might be something they can replicate. And frustratingly for me and them, there isn't really a thing, a moment that made me think today's the day. It was just kind of a combination of things, little things. So, for example, every single summer, because I was overweight, I would spend the entire summer just dripping with sweat because I was just permanently hot. Every time I got into a car, the seatbelt would be uncomfortable because it's kind of stretching around me, and it was just I'd have to change my wardrobe every year because everything would get too tight. So it's just this kind of compounding effect of annoying little things. And also, as I approached my 40th, I was aware that it was going to be harder. I mean, actually, what I perceived was that it would almost be impossible if I left it till after 40. Actually, that wouldn't have been the case, but it was my fear. So, yeah, all those little things and that worry about having left it too late just made me stop eating so much and start running. Although when I say running, it was literally jogging for maybe 100 meters and then having to, I was going to say walk, but actually just stop and get my breath back and then walk and then maybe jog another little bit. And so I did that very, very slowly and then got a bit quicker and then did a 5K park run. I think I did it in about 42, 43 minutes and discovered that I enjoyed that, or I enjoyed knowing that I could get better. I quite like, which is quite a handy thing to like, actually. I quite like being bad at something because I have a ridiculous ego that lets me know that I won't be bad at it for long. So when I start something and I'm rubbish at it, a good example of this, I bought a guitar recently and I bought it, obviously, I'd never played a guitar before, so I literally knew nothing, 50 years of age, and I bought a guitar. But my ego told me that within a couple of years, I'd be brilliant. So I went into it very positively. And yeah, we're now sort of 7 months on and I'm still rubbish. So my ego isn't right.
But you'd be ready to join a punk band with your decent guitar skills.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd be even... I mean, just even playing with my wife hearing me in the background annoys her. So I don't think nobody would pay to hear me. So my ego just told me, well, you're gonna get better. So the fact that you're rubbish at this now doesn't matter because there's these huge improvements to come. Obviously, some people, unfortunately, when they do something new and they're naturally bad at it because they're new, they get quite despondent about I'm never going to get any better, and they quit. Whereas I just thought, well, that's not going to happen. I'm going to be good at this because I'd always been very fortunate, I suppose. I started doing financial services, and within 6 months I was doing okay at it. So I had this kind of track record of maybe just getting lucky, but to a certain extent, that doesn't really matter. If you keep getting lucky at things you try, after 20 odd years of doing it, you start just assuming that you're just quite naturally gifted, even if that's a complete delusion. It really didn't matter for me. I just went into parkrun thinking I'm going to get faster and faster, and by the nature of that thinking process and training, that happened, and I just kind of plodded my way up to running, around 20 minutes, and then under 20 minutes for a 5K, and sort of 40 minutes for a 10K. It was all very slow progression, but it got there in the end. And as that was happening, I obviously got back in shape, and I lost the weight very, very quickly. The weight moves very fast, actually, if you want it to. Fitness is something that then lags behind. So within probably a year of starting to lose weight, I lost the bulk of the weight I needed to lose. I mean, if you put your mind to it and you're 100 pounds overweight, you can drop 100 pounds in a year. It's not pretty and it's not fun, but you can do that. What you can't do is become incredibly fit in a year. That just takes longer. So I got myself in physical appearance shape where I wanted to be, and then just got kind of just hooked on the running and different types of running. So I'd be doing trail runs and obstacle course races and stuff, and that just kind of progressed to eventually getting to a point where I was above average, which kind of became a sort of a target of mine to, if I was going to do something new, then getting better than most people at it seemed like something pretty easy to achieve, just on the basis that most people aren't committing themselves to anything with any real sort of severity. So it's quite easy to be better than most. And it's just enjoyable. It means you can turn up to a park run or a 5K or a 10K or anything, and know that you're going to be miles off the front. You're not winning that thing, but equally there's going to be more people behind you than there are in front of you, or there will be one day if you apply yourself. So I found that just quite an enjoyable way to do my fitness. I didn't need to be brilliant. I didn't need to be the best. I just needed to know that of all the people there on that day, there was more slower than there were faster. I kind of worked on the basis that if there was ever a zombie apocalypse and half the people got eaten, I wanted to be in the half that got away.
There's this saying that you don't have to be faster than the bear, you just have to be faster than your mates.
Yes, well, exactly that. Yeah, indeed. I mean, when I go to the pub with my old school friends who are obviously the same age as me, they're all 50. It does cross my mind that, if a bear or a zombie or anybody else kind of bursts into the pub and starts killing everybody, they're all going to get eaten, and I'm not, and that sends me home happy. So
I'd like to go just for a brief moment back to when you started running, and
yes,
in the C2 5K, so couch to 500 meter running subreddit, which is a great community to get started. There are people who are always concerned that they are too overweight and that it would be too stressful for their knees or ankles to start running, start jogging. So haven't you been concerned back then when you started out, or was it on a so low level that you would be fine with it?
I mean, it's a good point, and it's something I hear a lot. I mean, I get a lot of people say to me, exactly that. They say they're too heavy, and therefore it's going to, their knees are going to break, or even worse, their doctors told them that their knees are going to fall apart. I found that it wasn't as bad as that. I mean, initially when I very first started, it sounds silly, but I didn't know how to run. Actually, what the accurate way of putting that, in fact, is I'd forgotten how to run. Because if you ask a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old to run, they'll be able to do it perfectly. I mean, a human being is designed to be able to run, not necessarily particularly fast, but for many, many thousands of years, we've been able to at least jog quite comfortably. Otherwise, we would all be dead. We wouldn't be here. So I'd kind of forgotten how to run. So I started running at 35, and I didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know. I just sort of ran and hoped it would work. And I did get pain. I had shin pain and knee pain, hip pain, toe pain. I mean, I literally had pain everywhere. And I then read the book called Born to Run, that's quite a famous book in the running community. It's not necessarily liked by everybody. The gist of the book is a guy that went and studied the Tarahumara tribe in Mexico, who run barefoot a lot. It's just part of their culture. If they're going to go and visit the next village, they'll just run to it, even if it's sort of 30 or 40 miles away. That's just how they get about. And he went and studied them, and he was kind of figuring out how these people running these crazy distances with basically nothing on their feet almost. They're kind of making sort of coverings for their feet out of old car tires and stuff, and doing so well at it. In fact, doing so well at it that he took a couple of them to some big American ultramarathons, and that they just went and beat everybody. And it came back to, or he took it back to the fact that a lot of what we've been told, certainly in the last few years, or last sort of 20 years, by companies like Adidas and Nike and Puma and whoever else, that you need shoes to run, or you need specific types of shoes to run. It needs cushioned heels and air bubbles and all this sort of stuff. And clearly, human beings don't need shoes to run because we can do it without. So I took from that book the tips about barefoot running, or learning to run barefoot, by literally running barefoot. I mean, I bought some shoes which are called Vibram Five Fingers, which they have little toes in the shoe, and it basically allows you to run barefoot, but with some protection for the bottom of your feet. And people would think, hang on a minute, you're 150 kilos, you can't run with zero cushioning. But actually, what happens is you start to run properly, or at least I say properly. You start to run in a way that allows your body to deal with the weight. So yes. you would land on your midfoot, and by landing on your midfoot, it means that your calf muscle becomes responsible for letting your heel lower to the ground, and your calf muscle is therefore acting as a sort of a shock absorber for your leg. And if you look at your calf muscle and you compare it to the little tiny bubble of air in the back of a Nike trainer, you can see clearly which one is a more substantial bit of kit. So by using your legs properly, you can actually move yourself along, irrespective of being heavy, irrespective of what shoes you're wearing as well. So I did that. I did barefoot running, and then as I got faster, I progressed to not so much barefoot shoes, but certainly minimalist shoes that required there was zero drop, which means the bed of the shoe is not higher at the heel than it is at the front, which is now it's quite common, but back then was not a common design. Very wide at the front of the shoe to let your toes splay out the way they're designed to do, and because of that, I had absolutely no running injuries or pain or anything. I mean, I was able to run despite my weight pain-free. Now, that doesn't mean everybody will find that a solution, but I do think that the notion of certainly maybe not so much barefoot running, but midfoot landing is something that I am. If anybody asks me, how do you deal with shin splints, look up midfoot landing. I've focused very heavily on trying to land with my foot underneath me and the midfoot landing first. The minute I start striding out a little bit too far in front and putting my heel down first, that's when all the pain starts.
Yeah, from personal experience, I would highly recommend just having barefoot shoes in your everyday kit, because for me personally, I started out running with the old pair of trainers I had for years and immediately developed knee pain and thought, yeah, sure, it's my gear. So I went out, bought a very expensive pair of running shoes with bigger cushion, and they helped for a little while, but after a month I start getting the knee pain again. And when I just started for regular walks and for my everyday walking to use barefoot shoes, but those from Vivobarefoot, they are closed at the front, so it's not these little individual pockets for your toes, so they don't look that ridiculous, but they are compatible with your everyday needs. So they managed to develop muscle in my lower legs that then stabilized my knee. So I haven't had any problems running with my higher quality, big cushioned trainers. So Barefoot Shoes made running for me enjoyable again, and I think that many injuries could be prevented if people start thinking about all the muscles in their legs and not only those needed for a sprint or a burst.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting because I have the Vivobarefoot shoes as well. I wear those as my sort of dog walking shoes. I don't wear a shoe with a heel on, almost just never. It's just not something that I have in my collection of shoes, and because of that. Yeah, you mentioned developing the muscles. My calf muscles, the calf muscle is a notoriously hard muscle to get bigger. Bodybuilders hate it if they're not genetically predisposed to having big calves, trying to make them larger is really, really hard work. And yet mine, at the age of 35, grew visibly in about a year from just running barefoot. I mean, I'd always had pretty skinny lower legs, and being 6'6", it looked even worse. And within a year, my legs just transformed in front of my eyes. I mean, as a teenager, I spent hours now doing calf raises and trying to make my calves bigger, and running did just that. It made them bigger, made them stronger. It was pretty brutal and painful. I mean, for 6 months, my calves pretty much ached all the time, but then they really kind of caught up with where they needed to be. And yeah, since I have no issues. And it's funny you mentioned that that your wearing barefoot shoes makes your cushioned shoes work for you, because I had the same experience because I'd worn minimalist or barefoot shoes almost exclusively for about 10 years of running. When I finally went and got a proper sort of scientific gait analysis of my running style, which I'd never done before, the guy doing it said, your feet are perfect. You run absolutely perfect. There's nothing wrong with your feet. You don't need any sort of corrective shoe at all, because your feet have kind of learned to do what they're designed to do. So interestingly, because of that, it meant that I could stick on something like a Nike Alpha Fly or something, a super shoe, a carbon shoe, which is it's the opposite of what I've been saying. It's massively cushioned, and it's designed to give you lots of bounce and help you out. And because my feet are so good naturally, I could stick those on only for a race day and take huge advantage of it in a way that somebody who had issues with their ankles rolling and pronation and so on, they might struggle to get the most out of a shoe like that. Whereas I can now put on a carbon high cushioned super shoe for a race, and it will help me go just significantly faster. So I train. All my training is in minimalist or barefoot shoes, and I race if I want to go real quick in fancy high cushioned carbon shoes. So yeah, I go back to your original point. You can definitely do it if you're heavy. The only thing I would say about being heavy, there are within the social media running world, there are a few people who have got huge followings from running and being very heavy, which is fine. The one thing I do say to people is that while you can be heavy and run, and I was evidence of that, as are many other people, there's no doubt that if you are heavier than you should be, you will run slower than you could do. And there's just no question about that. So the idea that you can be heavy and run is brilliant. The idea that being heavy doesn't matter to your running is quite simply wrong. I mean, it just makes you slower. And it makes it harder. Now, you could decide that you don't care and you just enjoy eating, which is causing you to be heavy. Or I say you enjoy it, or maybe you simply can't stop it. Maybe you have an eating disorder, and you simply aren't in control of that. It will impact your running. I say to some extent. I mean, it will impact it in almost direct correlation to how heavy you are. The heavier you get, the slower you will be. And that's just physics and gravity and boring stuff like that. So I'm a fan of people that are heavy using running to get not heavy.
Yeah, but that's quite an ambivalent situation. So you mentioned we are well adapted for running, and that's great because we can run for long distances, but we are very efficient in energy consumption while running. So for losing weight, running is not that ideal, I would suggest.
No. In fact, it's an interesting point. I'm doing a video in the next few weeks on exactly that. I mean, they're sort of cousins to each other. Weight. If you are too heavy and you lose weight, it will help you run. And if you go running, to some extent, it will help you lose weight. But they aren't the same. They are separate things. It's quite possible to lose weight and never run, and it's quite possible to run and never worry about your weight. They should be, and the way I focus on it is I address them separately. So if I look in the mirror and think, I am too fat, I've just put on too much weight, then what I will do is I will address what I'm doing in the kitchen, and I will look at my food intake for that. Mm-hmm. I won't think I'm getting too heavy, so I need to up my running. That would be a very inefficient way of dealing with that weight problem. And the same way, if my running is not very good, I will address that by my running training. I look at whether I'm doing enough fast work or slow work, whatever it might be. And I don't try to fix my running with my weight or my weight with my running, but I do understand that if I can work on them separately, when they come together, they work better. I mean, quite simply, if I am carrying 10 kilos more than I should do, I'm going to be slower. The same as if you stick 100 kilos in the boot of your BMW, you're going to get worse fuel economy. It's just physics. I say useless weight, but body fat beyond a certain point is of no use. You need a certain amount of body fat, but once you start getting up to sort of 20%, 30%, 40% for some people, that has no use.
Yeah,
that is useless weight.
When you mentioned going to the kitchen and figuring things out there, you're probably aware of the Ironman athlete Jan Frodeno from Germany.
Yes, indeed, yeah.
And so he made a claim, and I would like to hear first your guess on that. He mentioned how much his time in the kitchen influences his overall performance. And he said that in a percentage. So what would you guess? How many percent of your overall performance do you achieve from what you're eating and what you're preparing in the kitchen?
Oh, so it's interesting because I guess that he either says a very high percentage or a very low percentage, depending on his thinking. I mean, for an Ironman athlete, the especially on the bike and running, that your weight is crucial, and the kitchen is 95% of your weight. So that side of it, if he's focusing on keeping his weight at the right place, then he's probably talking about 70-80% of it being down to the kitchen. Equally, the other way is if you say, no, my weight's okay, then it becomes all about your training. But if your weight needs addressing, it's all kitchen.
Yeah, he said 70% of his performance is determined by the time spent in the kitchen. And I was impressed because so my initial thought was so I could reach 70% of his performance just by eating better. So I'm in the lucky situation that I never had a real struggle with being overweight, but I was eating not that nutritious. So it was more of my body fighting for keeping himself as healthy as one could be. And yeah, I changed that in the last years and saw a huge impact on every single aspect of my life, like mental health, getting better just by having a regular meal and having times where I don't have a meal. So just by fasting and not eating when one feels to and not having snacks in reach just changed my overall well-being. And so just by listening to Jan Frodeno, who said 70% of his performance is achieved in the kitchen, and me thinking, okay, so half of his performance would be great for me, so I could try something with my diet that improved my overall well-being massively. And I think it's quite similar for you when you said that you changed your life from being overweight. It's not only the training, it had to be a massive change in the intake you had.
Absolutely right. Yes. I mean, it's interesting. You mentioned, excuse me, you mentioned VO2 max earlier. Yes. I see a lot of new runners asking, how do I improve my VO2 max? And if you are overweight, there is absolutely no question. You want to improve your VO2 max, lose weight, because your VO2 max is a good example of why weight matters, because it's a calculation that is presented as maximum volume of oxygen uptaken per kilo of body weight. So if you put on 10 kilos, but you don't improve your fitness and your fitness remains the same, simply by adding 10 kilos, your VO2 max is going to go down because you've now got effectively the same level of fitness, but having to move a larger amount of weight. It's the same as brake horsepower per ton for a car. If you have two cars with 300 horsepower and you stick 100 kilos in the boot of one, that car is going to be producing less horsepower per ton and will be slower or less efficient. And so if you want to get fitter, there is a direct correlation with your weight resulting in you being fitter. The mistake that people then make is they then think that their fitness training is what will lead them to correcting the weight issue. And that isn't always the case. You need to sort of step away from your training mentality and put on your kind of chef's hat and fix the kitchen side. And then you'll find your training naturally gets better. The problem is people think, I'm fat and it's making me run slow. So if I run faster and harder and longer, I won't be so fat. That isn't the way to do it. As you say, you fix the fat in the kitchen, and then when you go running, you'll find you've naturally got better.
Yes, you managed with your videos and talking about healthy eating in several other podcasts. You managed for me to make the difference between knowing about food addiction and actually understanding it, because I always thought, it's overweight is simply a problem of too much in and too less movement. So getting to understand that it's not just simply a bad habit of eating trash, but it's directly linked to an addiction like alcoholism. It's not just, just quit drinking and you will be fine. Yeah, sure, ultimately that's the fix, but it won't help the person in the situation. So listening to you talking about similar mechanisms in a diet and being addicted to bad food, that really made me understand, not just know about it, but making the difference of understanding why people are struggling losing weight. That's one of the things where I would say you're way more than just an entertainer or motivation for others. You are actually an educator in a quite easy way to digest by having the humor in your videos. Leaving that there. Sorry, there's no direct question. So.
No. I mean, no. But thank you. I mean, they're nice things to say. It's the addiction, the food addiction, is an interesting one, because I didn't start on social media, and when I started exercising, which was probably about 13, 14 years ago now, social media and fitness weren't really the thing that they are today. So I wasn't on Instagram, and I mean it didn't exist back then. But as I got fitter and started to use social media, I started to be presented with just so many people saying, if you're fat, it's because you're lazy and you're stupid and all this sort of stuff. And I can remember thinking, well, that doesn't make sense, because when I was at my fattest, I was working 20 hours a day and getting people to invest millions of pounds. So I wasn't lazy because I was always at work, and I wasn't stupid because I was. If I was stupid, I was incredibly lucky because I was getting paid very well for what I did. So it kind of struck me that actually fat people aren't necessarily lazy and stupid. That just makes no sense. That there are plenty of people running, massive international companies who are fat, but no one's going to accuse them of being lazy, stupid people. So there is something more going on with food than just people that can't be bothered to stop stuffing themselves with food. There is something more there. And I thought it just quite important for people that have never had a problem with that to understand that, in the same way that if you have never had a problem with alcohol, for example, as a common thing, a common drug that everyone or most people use, it's quite hard to understand why the alcoholic doesn't just stop drinking. You'll think, well, I can have half a bottle of wine and just stop. Why can't they? What, are they too stupid to stop? And actually, with alcoholism, because everyone understands that is a inverted commas a proper addiction, people don't think you're stupid if you can't stop drinking. They just assume you're an alcoholic, and that's part of the deal, that you just can't stop. But when it comes to food, which is the same thing for some people, not for everyone, but for some people, there is this assumption that if you're standing, as I have been, at 4 o'clock in the morning in front of your fridge, absolutely full up. You spent all day eating, feel sick with having eaten so much, and taking more food out the fridge and eating it. I'm not doing that because I'm lazy and stupid, and I'm certainly not doing it because I want to do it. I'm not standing there thinking, I'm really hungry, I fancy a donut. I'm thinking, I do not want to eat that donut, and eating it anyway. And that is a different thing to people's assumption that people that overeat are all just idiots. There is something going on. And the way to, certainly in my case, the way to deal with it was that if I treated it like, and very importantly, I got people around me to treat it like an addiction, then it made things easier. So, for example, my wife doesn't have junk food in the house because she knows if she does, I'll eat it. The same way as if I had a friend coming over for drinks and he was an alcoholic, I wouldn't stick a load of beer cans on the table in front of him and just expect him to ignore them. It would either be hard for him or he would fail. So in the same way, I treat my kitchen the way an alcoholic might treat theirs. They're not going to fill it with temptation, and I avoid putting myself into situations where I'm going to be tempted, or I just adopt a very sort of aggressive is probably the best word for it, a very aggressive attitude to not failing. So if I go out for a meal and I'm not going to be eating a dessert, then I'm strict with myself. I'm not eating a dessert, just full stop. And anyone that tries to tempt me gets treated as someone. For example, if I said to one of my friends, I've got friends who are alcoholics, if I said to them, go on, have a drink, it won't matter, that they'd probably be tempted to punch me in the face for being so inconsiderate of their situation. So I almost adopt that same sort of approach. If I'm at a family do and someone's saying, go on, Mark, it's fine, eat a bit more, you'll be okay, I'll be very clear that I don't want to do that and leave people in no uncertain doubt. And I hear people often saying, I felt compelled to have a piece of cake because everyone else was doing it, and I felt rude to say no. And I think people would often do well just to put themselves and their needs first. I mean, going right back to when I was a lifeguard, if someone's drowning, the first thing you don't do is just jump in with them because you're now drowning as well. If you look after yourself, you're then a far more effective lifeguard. So I just regard myself being fit and healthy and happy as being the most important thing, and I can then be there for others. So if just kind of bowing to peer pressure and so on, it is a very short-term fix, a very short-term high that then leads to long-term being very bad. I mean, I was not a very good and pleasant and happy person to be around when I was grossly overweight, despite being happy at the moment I would be eating the cake. And now I'm occasionally miserable because I don't get cake, but for the other 99% of the time, I'm in a far better place.
No. You mentioned that you're online talking about losing weight, and there are many people who will look up to that and try to have a similar or same journey as you. from being overweight to getting back in shape, or some will probably try to be above average. You recently featured a man who did this transition from being overweight and having a struggle just going on a flight in a plane because he was insecure if he would even be able to enter the airplane's toilet.
Yeah, he couldn't. Yeah, Miles. Yeah, he was too big for the toilet. Yeah.
To nowadays being an ultra marathon athlete and running crazy distances. So online there's a comment culture, and it's one of the worst, but there are people arguing that I have a hard time wrapping my head around it. But for example, body positivity is something I would say everybody should be happy with their body, but not happy to a point where you don't think you should improve or change something. And nobody should be discriminated for being, for example, overweight. But the body positivity movement brought the fat acceptance movement with them. And this is a crowd I don't really get, because what's the point? What's achievable in being overweight? What's the achievable in being unhealthy? And when people are getting healthy, getting back into shape, there are always people saying, oh, there's just the peer pressure from outside. It's nothing you're doing for yourself. It's something you're doing performative. And when you're posting on social media, for example, I lost around about 10 kilos from eating trash and don't thinking about it to just buying a scale and looking at it. And every time I talk with people, they're like, yeah, but you're making it even harder for people who are in a real struggle, so don't share when you lose weight. So you several times talked about the fat acceptance crowd, and I would love to hear your stance right at the moment about them and about the comment culture and the internet in general.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I agree that people should be. I'm not sure. Body positivity is an interesting one. I think you should be positive about yourself. I mean, I can be, for example, right now is a good example. I've had the last 6 months, I've had a few injuries and so on. So I'm not in the shape I want to be in. And I will be within a few months, but right now I'm not. Now, if someone said to me, am I positive about how I am? I'm very positive. Yeah, my life is incredible. I mean, incredibly privileged to do the things I do, and everything is great. I have an incredible wife, and everything's good. So I'm very positive about who I am and where I am. But I'm also able to look in the mirror and say, that isn't good. I'm not positive about that. It's no different to looking at my car. If my car was filthy and needed a good wash, I'm not going to look at it and say, no, it's lovely. It's not. It's filthy and needs a wash. I mean, some things are just a reality. So when I was, grossly overweight, I looked and people would say, did anyone fat shame you? And I would say, yes, me. I'd look in the mirror and think that's a shame. And so I don't think there's a problem with people just being real about their situation, and that. I mean, it's as simple as that. So yes, I look in the mirror, and if I'm too fat, I think I'm too fat. The same as I would think my car needs a clean, or my lawn needs mowing, or whatever it might be. Some of these things are simply reality. There's no So I don't understand the body positivity. If you're obese, looking at that and thinking be positive about it, to me, I mean, an analogy that I've used a few times actually, especially when it comes down to kind of ridiculing people for being overweight and so on. If I see somebody that is grossly overweight, so if I'm in a bar or something and there's somebody at the bar and they are very, very fat, I mentioned this because I had literally this exact scenario. So I was in a restaurant in London. There was a guy at the bar and he was huge stomach, very overweight, morbidly obese, so bad for his health. And the people I was with were kind of laughing and joking about that. And what was interesting was I thought, if that person at the bar was somebody who had perhaps a young lady who had scars on her arm where she had been self-harming herself, those two things have similarities. Self-harm and eating enough that you are harming yourself. there are huge similarities there. It is self-inflicted. It's not necessarily within the person's control to do much about it. It would be great if they weren't doing it. It's not good for their health. Arguably, a young lady who eventually stops self-harming versus a man who continues eating into old age, the fat man is having far more health problems than the young lady. But what's interesting is that the fat guy will laugh and joke about, and he even may laugh and joke himself, kind of pat his belly and be proud of it. Whereas the young lady with the scars on her arm, nobody in there, or nobody decent at least, would think to have anything other than sympathy for that person. And if they required and asked for help, you would offer to give it. And if they didn't ask for help, they would simply hope that person got it anyway. So I see people that are self-harming, as I did, through the excess food consumption, as anybody else that is harming themselves, for reasons that are certainly on the surface beyond their control, that ridicule and shame is an insane thing to do. It's just cruel to do that. Whatever the person's, it's no different to laughing as an alcoholic. It's just wrong. But equally, you wouldn't accept it either. This acceptance. For example, if you see somebody, very overweight running a marathon, and they say, yeah, that's what I do. I have no intention of losing weight. I'm going to keep running these marathons at 150, 200 kilos, whatever it might be. Some people would say, well, that's great. That's incredible that you're body positive and that you're showing that it can be done. If the same person, or indeed a fit and healthy looking person, was running a marathon while smoking a cigarette, people would say you're an idiot. What are you doing? That's not very good for you. Nobody would say you're cigarette positive. Smoke
Yes,
smoke
sure.
Positive. It would be insane if you ran. If I went and ran a marathon tomorrow, smoking and drinking, I'd still be in better shape than the vast majority of people there. But no one's going to be saying, "Well done, Mark. You're a great, positive example of how alcoholic smokers can run." They'd say you're an idiot. Stop doing that. So maybe it's because I'm 50 years old. I'm fairly straightforward about these things. In fact, I have quite an interesting perspective, because while I'm quite straightforward about what is presented in front of me, and if that thing in front of me is someone that's grossly overweight, my solution is, or my thinking is, that is not good. So I don't see the kind of emperor's new clothes of that being this kind of body positive thing. However, I'm not someone who, having that sort of forthright conclusion that it's just bad, then says the solution to that is to laugh and ridicule. I am culturally enough up to date to understand that that person does need something different than being laughed at. So when it comes to social media, the only people on social media that I have a slight issue with are the people that are very overweight and make no effort to lose weight, and their identity becomes an overweight runner, exercise, whatever it might be. But because to me that isn't what exercise and weight should be. Someone saying I'm 300 pounds, but I'm going to run a marathon and hopefully next year I'll be 200 pounds or faster. That's brilliant. I'm applauding that overweight person doing that. But someone saying, no, I can run a marathon and then just eat more donuts because I've just proved you can run a marathon. I don't quite see that. And often the reality is those people aren't. I mean, they say that there's plenty of people online that are the kind of obese marathon runners, but they're not actually running in the traditional sense of marathon. They're getting around a marathon. They're doing it in 6 or 7 or 8 hours. And again, there's no problem with your first marathon being 6 or 7 or 8 hours, or maybe not even being able to finish your first marathon. There's no problem with that. But what I'd like to see is that if that's the case, you then go about your life in such a way that the next time you're a little bit better, you don't simply say, well, I eventually got round, after everyone else had gone home, So I'm brave and empowering, and I'll do the same again next time. That's the part I don't like. Unfortunately, it's something that you can monetize. I mean, I could put on all my weight that I ever lost. I could put it back on, and I could quite easily get a large following online as a body positive, a fat runner or cyclist or whatever it was I wanted to be. There is money to be had from that.
Yeah, sure. There are plenty of people who are overweight who want to see somebody saying, yeah, I was one of you too. Then I got an above average athlete and now I'm back being overweight and it's okay. That's the kind of reassuring people want to hear, but it's not saving their lives. It's making themselves in the long term miserable. And back when you mentioned the Emperor's New Clothes, so the important part of the story is the child calling out what reality actually is, so that the emperor is naked. And I am not sure if there is a respectful, friendly way to approach people who aren't close friends and saying to them that they probably need help and support to make a lifestyle change. And you being there, being overweight and changing your lifestyle, do you think there is a respectful way, or do you think there is something that has to click by themselves and that's nothing that can be approached from the outside?
I don't think there is a solution to it. No, I and I've got more and more cynical about it as I've kind of got into the whole YouTubing world. What I now do and what my job allows me to do is to sit in front of my camera and, for want of a better word, preach my message. And people that choose to click on my video and watch it can hear that, and those that don't, and I don't care. What I wouldn't want to do, for example, I wouldn't want to be a personal trainer or something of that nature. I'm not qualified for it anyway, but I wouldn't want to do it because I wouldn't want the hassle, really, of having to try and convince people. I don't have to convince anybody of anything on YouTube. I just say what I believe, and if people don't want to be convinced, they don't watch the video. So I don't have to care about people that aren't on board. I am literally kind of preaching to the converted because they're already here listening to me. When it comes to friends and family, what I've noticed is that especially when people, someone that's a fairly new friend, that they might discover what I do and my fitness background, and if they are out of shape, they'll ask questions about, say, oh, I'm thinking of losing a bit of weight, and should I do this and should I do that? And I'm well aware that the reality is, for most people, they aren't serious. Those sort of thoughts flow around anyone that's overweight. Those thoughts are in their head permanently. I had for about 15 years, I would spend every day thinking, oh, I might do something today about it. But statistically, the chance of someone being at that exact moment where they are going to change, when they happen to ask you about how best to avoid cake, is very unlikely. So I've spent far too many times saying to someone, oh, well, that's interesting. If you're asking about how do I avoid cake, here's what I do. And I don't have it in the house, and I do this, and I eat this instead. And after an hour, they'll say, yeah, I just really like cake, though. And I just think, well, I'm wasting my time here. This is pointless. So I think people have to, on their own, for no other reason than something's happened in their mind that's clicked, have to decide to move forward. And it's the same with I have far too close an experience of someone that was an alcoholic in my life, and it's the same thing. You just go absolutely insane if you try and force onto them what might be obvious, which is stop drinking before your life falls apart. But you wanting that and offering your advice as how to achieve it just doesn't work if the person isn't receptive to it, and that needs to come from them. So when people contact me out of the blue through no prompting on my part and say, I am there, I'm now ready, I'm doing, I want help, I'm very, very receptive to those people. But when I meet people who just happen to be out of shape, and because they hear what I do, they they sort of start asking questions about it and say, yeah, actually, I thought about doing an Ironman as well once, and they're 100 pounds too heavy. I just don't waste my time on that. I'm quite cynical about most people's genuine intention. So I need to see someone really showing that they are committed to change before I waste my time trying to help them. Which sounds a bit kind of mean and nasty, but it's it would drive me mad otherwise. I like what I can do on YouTube because I know that the people that are wanting to change have found me and they're out there. They don't need convincing, and those that aren't really that interested just won't bother watching. Yeah. Or they'll watch because it's funny and they just want to be entertained. That's great too. I don't like trying to convince people of anything. I find it too fatiguing. Maybe because I spent 25, nearly 30 years in sales. So my entire life was based around trying to get people to do stuff and to sell things. I don't enjoy. It's an interesting one. I enjoy selling. I enjoy the concept of presenting something in a way that makes it sound appealing. So I enjoy the sales process. What I don't like is having to do it with someone actually literally sat in front of me needing to be convinced. So with YouTube, I can kind of go through the sales process of presenting an argument in such a way that to a sensible person, it should sound compelling. But then I don't need to worry about whether the person says, yes, I'm buying that, because I just finished my recording and I go and do something else. So I get the fun part of the sales process, which is the pitch.
Yes.
But I never actually need to close the sale because YouTube doesn't require that. When you're doing it in real life, you need to not only pitch the solution to the person, you really need to have that close as well. Otherwise, you're just left kind of pitching in the wind. It's a pointless exercise. So I'm not very good. So all my fat friends are still fat because I can't be bothered to help them.
But there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of people out in the world who changed their habits due to your videos, or at least your videos have been part of the change.
Well, that's yes, that's the beauty of YouTube. The beauty, to go back to that point, I can make my sales pitch on YouTube, and then rather than having to wait for an individual to say, yes, I'm buying what you're selling. When I say that, I mean the ideas. Rather than having to actually have that, I just assume that if 500,000 people watch that video, somebody or many people perhaps will have bought it. I don't need to hear. I hear anyway, because people contact me all the time and say they did buy into that. It's a very nice way of selling. You basically do your pitch, you throw it out there to the planet, and you assume that statistically someone's going to buy what you're selling, rather than having to do it one to one and really be stressed that individual may or may not. And that's the stress of sales, is waiting for that moment of the client in front of you, or the customer, or the fat friend, whatever it might be. You're waiting for them to say, yes, I want it. And if that doesn't come, you're left either disappointed or feeling like you've wasted time. There's none of that on YouTube. YouTube, It's just, here's my pitch, here's my idea, and I'm done. And I hope someone laughed on the other side, or they transformed their life, but I don't need to worry about it. I just leave them to it.
Now, when I was talking with people yesterday, when we made the arrangement for the interview, and I was talking to them, saying that I was so humbled that you will be on air on my show, and they didn't know you, I tried to briefly explain what you're doing, and I summarized it by, yeah, he's an athlete and he's the gym body you want without the gym bro attitude. And I think that's what makes your sales pitches, or pitches in general, so convincing, that you saying what it was that you did and leaving me with the beneficial information and a joke that's very easy to follow or just ignore. And it's not these are my metrics. It's important for you to improve your metrics in the same way, because that's ridiculous. But there are many people out there trying to do exactly that. These gym bro mindset hustlers showing you what kind of heavy sets they are lifting right now and just buy their supplements to reach whatever they are doing. So the big topic of metrics is one I would like to briefly discuss with you, because one of the most obvious metrics is weight compared to height and age, and that's where people start first, and then some of them will get to VO2 max or heart rate variability, watts, and so on. You made videos about several different fitness trackers and watches, but then quite recently you made a video of you going paddling in your kayak without any gear and not tracking every heartbeat of this interesting journey. And there's a shift in the mindset you presented, that one shouldn't do the sports for the recorded data, but for the sake of it. And if you could just talk briefly about why metrics matter and why they don't matter all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, because I love data. I mean, I love two things. I love data and I love gadgets. So an expensive fancy watch that gives me all of that is just brilliant. So I've had lots of different Garmin watches and Apple watches and Apple Watch Ultra and all sorts of stuff. So I have spent a lot of my time tracking everything. And there are times when I find that, I was going to say useful, I find it very motivational. In reality, whether or not it's useful is sometimes debatable. In fact, it's interesting. Sometimes I think that when people track their data, that data it's almost a bit like if you see, sometimes if you're walking around London, a big city or something, and you see a busker and a street performer, and he's juggling or something stupid in the street, and you'll see people around them, and they'll have their phones out, they'll be filming the street juggler, and eventually they'll turn their phone off and they'll go on their way. What they've now got on their phone is a 3-minute video of some bloke in Covent Garden juggling. And you think, why on earth did you bother doing that? When are you ever going to, in the future, sit down and think, do you know what I'm going to do? And go and look at that 3-minute footage of that idiot juggling. Or you're going to find yourself with your friends and say, you never believe what I did the other day. Went to London. Here's a video of a juggler. You've just gathered data that is just the most useless data. I mean, it doesn't even, you can't even measure how stupid that is. And you see it all the time. You see people all the time filming things. In fact, funny enough, I had the Red Arrows, which is the Royal Air Force display team. They flew over my house the other day. I've no idea why. There was also a display on somewhere. So I hit his roar. I'm in my garden office. I look out and these jets fly over my house pretty low. I thought, wow. And my first thought was, I should have had my phone. I could have taken a photograph. And I thought, well, why would I have done that? What would I have done with that photograph? I've got now basically a rubbish photograph. If I want a photograph of the Red Arrows, I'll Google the Red Arrows and I'll get an amazing photograph of the Red Arrows that someone decent has taken, probably from another plane. It won't be some moron in his garden with an iPhone as they're disappearing into the distance. So this compulsion with just kind of gathering stuff that we don't need is a bit silly. And I think the same. A lot of the races I've done, I've tracked all sorts of data and metrics that actually during the race might have been useful to know my pace and my heart rate and so on. But beyond that, it's up there with jugglers and Red Arrow photographs. So I only really recently realised that. I just had a kind of a moment at the beginning of this year, right? I just started to question why for the last 10, 11, 12 years, I'd been quite so focused on this gathering of fitness information, which was now redundant. I mean, knowing what I was doing when I was 41, 42, now I'm 50, it's completely irrelevant, that information. And again, some people are going to say, no, I'm an elite athlete and I do need to know what I'm doing one season to the next and so on, that's great. But most people, it's pointless. So the kayak thing was really just to, I mean, it was a fun thing to do, but it was also just to emphasize that at least now and again, just going and doing something just for the enjoyment of being fit enough to be able to do it is all you need to do. You know, what you need to take home from that, as I did, is the memory of having done it and the satisfaction of being able to have done it. You don't need to know how many calories you burned because it's completely irrelevant. It's just meaningless, absolutely meaningless. So I now do that quite a lot. In fact, I don't regularly now wear a sports watch. I used to have one that would just track everything, how many steps I'm doing, all sorts of daily nonsense that, again, I don't need to know. Now, if I had no exercise in my life, then maybe tracking steps might be a start. But I'm just not somebody that needs to worry about whether I did 5,000 or 10,000 steps today. It just doesn't. It's not meaningful to me. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of tech. But in fact, interestingly, I have a line in a video that I'm working on today about sports watches, and it steals a line from Jurassic Park where Jeff Goldblum, as Ian Malcolm says, that you're so preoccupied with seeing what you could do that you forgot to ask yourself what if you should. And it's a little bit like that with sports watches. They can do so much, but really, should you be using them to do all that? There's people that do high rocks events at the moment that are often asking me how to set their watch up to track every single individual activity within a high rocks race. And I say to them, yeah, you can do that. The watch is, it's £1,000 Garmin. It will do that. But should you? Sounds like a complete waste of time to me. Just start the watch for a cardio activity at the beginning and turn it off at the end. Or even better, don't wear a watch. You don't need a watch to do high rocks if you don't want one. So yeah, a lot of people, because the technology can do stuff, they've just assumed that they should, and it gets worse and worse. I mean, the latest thing is things like continuous glucose monitoring, where people are plugging in glucose meters into their arms, the way that diabetics genuinely have a need to do. And then they're using the fact that they can monitor their daily glucose as being of some use. They can say, well, I ate a bowl of sugary cereal, so my blood sugar went up. And what a staggering surprise. Who'd have thought? So again, it's another example of just because you can monitor something doesn't mean you should, or at least there's not necessarily a value to it. So I do that whenever I strap on my watch to do something, to monitor something, to record something. I start off with the question, what do I need to know at the end of this event or during the event? I don't ask myself, what can my watch do? Because if I do that, you end up tracking everything. I mean, VO2 max is a good example. Everyone's watch nowadays will track their VO2 max. But in reality, if your watch didn't track your VO2 max, what difference would it make? No one's going to change their training because of it. And what do people think we did 10 years ago when that technology didn't even exist anyway? It's funny because I expect in 20 years' time, when your watch will monitor stuff like, goodness knows, lactic acid buildup, and it will probably monitor blood glucose and all those sort of things, people will think, how on earth did we ever train before we had that information to hand? And we just went to the gym and worked out, like we used to 30 years ago. Nobody 30 years ago was going to a gym and thinking, I can't work out today because I forgot my Garmin. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So yeah, I love gadgets. I love tech. And it does great on YouTube. I mean, those videos are very profitable. So I will make them. And hopefully people that want to buy a watch will watch my videos first. But I'm also, even in those videos, I am very real about the fact that I'm not a slave to the information.
Yes. On the topic of smartwatches, I think they are a great tool to improve a moment by giving you information, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily will improve every moment. And like, for example, people filming a concert, what are you going to do with that video? Are you going back looking at microphones recording trash audio of you trying to film something from a shaky position? And that's not going to happen. They just want to improve the fact that the device will, in other situations, be helpful to bring more data in the moment, to improve a moment that can't be improved by that. And going back to smartwatches, for example, there are moments where I deliberately will take off the smartwatch, for example, or everything regarding intercourse. I don't want to have that tracked for Tim Apple or myself, because there's no reason for me to compare it to last time or whatever. But when going on a treadmill, I want to be tracked for myself to know if I improved over last time, if things are working out for me, if I'm on the path I want to follow. And these awareness of moments and moments that can't be improved by more data is something that is getting lost by people buying even more fancier smartwatches.
Yeah, I mean, the filming the concert is a perfect example, isn't it? I mean, what a, you know, just because your watch or your phone rather can do that, it doesn't mean you should. And in fact, if you do, you're an idiot. You know, why on earth you spend X £100 getting to the tickets and then you watch it through a 3-inch screen? It's just ridiculous. What's interesting is that we've got coming up soon in probably September, there's rumours of the new Garmin Fenix 8 coming out. And a lot of people have contacted me and said, oh, you know, your previous videos on the Garmins did well and they were useful, and are you going to be getting an 8? And I feel that I have got with Garmin sports watches to the same place I got with the iPhone. So my iPhone, which I religiously updated every single year, my iPhone is an iPhone 13 Pro Max.
Yeah, 12 Pro Max on here. It's good enough.
Yeah, exactly. So I got the 13, and I think when I got the 13, I was left thinking that's not much different to the previous one, and I haven't bothered to upgrade it since, because there are improvements, obviously, but they are so minuscule now that they aren't worth worrying about. And someone said to me, what do you want on a Garmin 8? And I thought there's nothing. What will happen probably is things like they'll say something like the VO2 max tracking has got more accurate. And I'm just left thinking, well, I didn't care about it in the first place. So until a device like that has a huge leap forward, for example, they told me that the Garmin is going to now have mobile phone technology built into it, and you can make calls on it, something that was just transformative. Or with a mobile phone, if someone said, now your mobile phone's going to, I don't know, project a little hologram and you'll be able to see the person in real life, I might buy it. But just telling me that it's got 12 more pixels or something stupid, I think maybe just because I'm getting old, I've just started to question whether I really need something, whereas in the past I would have just thought, well, I just do. And even more so if I see somebody online telling me, and I see that all the time, people saying, you need this, you need a Whoop strap, whatever it might be. Here's my code, buy it, give me a discount, I'll make some money. I become very cynical that anybody pushing technology on the internet has, well, they all have an ulterior motive. Nobody is making, well, I say nobody, hardly anybody is making gear reviews on the internet purely for the enjoyment of people watching. I mean, that's not why anybody does that job. It's a job. They're making money, whether it's AdSense off of Google or whether it's kickbacks from the companies. It's about making money. It's like when you watch an advert on the TV for your bank, and the bank sort of portrays themselves as this kind of caring entity that is only lowering their interest rates because they want to help you out. And you think, well, a lot of absolute rubbish. There's a business decision for what you're doing. Don't try and package it up like I'm a moron that doesn't understand that. And that happens an awful lot with tech on the internet. People are presenting it as though you absolutely need it, when in reality what they mean is they want you to buy it because they're going to make a bit of money if you do. And that's a very different thing. But my videos on tech, I've never been given anything by Apple or Garmin. And so I quite happily say, If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. I sometimes change my minds over time. In fact, funny enough, I did a video where 6 months later, I said I've been using the Apple Watch for 6 months. I started off by saying it was not very good, and I changed my mind. I really quite like it now. And I'm allowed to do that because that's what we do in real life. You know, people do change their minds. And yet people assumed that because I suddenly decided I liked it, I must have been paid by Apple. So I wish. I mean, it was just, you know, when people are presented by a genuine human reaction, that they're almost too cynical to believe that it's actually a real thought process I've gone through. So no, tech is great. It has its place. I love it. But I'm also a fan of occasionally just thinking, you know, I don't need to monitor this race or this run, or I can go out for a walk with the dog because I don't need to know how many steps I did. And I say I don't need to be filming jugglers.
Okay, I would say that are great words for my very tech-driven community, and I think nothing in our whole conversation will be as controversial as the last minutes where we're saying, yeah, they are great gadgets, but you don't need them in every moment to make it a better moment. So thank you very much for your time and the interview, and thank you very much that it was possible on such a short notice. I will link your YouTube channel and your Instagram, and is there something in particular you would like to plug?
No, just those. I mean, if people want to kind of see more or hear more, then yeah, go on YouTube, send them a link for that, and that is good enough. Instagram is just there if people want to see kind of behind the scenes pictures, but most of it's happening on YouTube. So anybody wants to get a bit more of this sort of stuff, that's where you can find it.
Okay, so that was Mark Lewis. Thank you for your time and have a good day.
Thank you.